Recovery Sort Of is a podcast where we discuss recovery topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The attitudes expressed are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised, there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
Welcome back. It's Recovery Sort Of. I'm Jason, a guy that absolutely trusts in something.
And I'm Billy. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
And following along with our spiritual principles, here we are. It's the 5th month, and we're going to talk about trust. What the hell is trust? I feel like, just at first examination, and this is subject to change over the course of our hour here, but I feel like I believe more in trust as an idea than I have in maybe the last couple of willingness and courage. And
yeah. So do you have a definition of trust, or do we have a
the dictionary definition would be a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something, which doesn't say much.
No. I was like, oh hell, that sums up. Yeah, okay.
That's as a noun, so that's interesting. As a verb, it's believe in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of. That doesn't tell me much either.
So what is it different about that than, say, willingness or?
It just
surrender?
seems more tangible. I can't in any way measure willingness. I can't measure courage, and they don't seem to really translate into anything if I try to examine them too deeply. But trust, I don't know that I can measure it necessarily, but there's some sort of tangible evidence of it in action. I don't give somebody $10 as a loan if I'm not trusting that they'll give it back. There's actually a thing I will or won't do based on this level of trust. I can kind of see that. Maybe. God, now you're making me wonder. Maybe trust isn't real either. Fuck. Thought I was on to something.
Well, and I'm trying to think so in that case, it's trust leads to the willingness. You trust at least that they're going to pay you back, so you're willing to give them the money.
Well, so here's the weird thing about that example. I don't loan money with the impression that I'm going to get it back. I thought that
too. It was me neither. Because
my trust is in, if I give someone money, I'm trusting that I don't need that money.
Right.
That's what I'm trusting in. I'm trusting I can survive without it, and I'm okay with not getting it back.
Right.
That's the only trust I have there.
Yeah. So then it seems like trust is the thought, and the willingness is the action.
Well, I trust you, but so trust is interesting. So I trust different people for different things.
Yeah, 100%.
I trust my wife to take good care of my kids, and yet I don't necessarily trust her if I say, hey, there's this thing that I need you to take care of, and if it doesn't get taken care of, they're going to chop my head off. She's probably not who I'm calling, honestly.
Yeah, similar.
And I love my wife, but she's just not necessarily shown herself to be super thorough in that sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. I learned that early on in recovery. Same principle is that, you don't trust everyone with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Certain people are more reliable at certain things than other people.
I always feel and granted, why would this situation ever occur? But if my kids ever got in a situation where they were like, oh my God, this person's going to shoot me if I don't have this thing taken care of, I'm the guy you call for that. I will take care of it to the fucking detail, whatever the instructions are. I'm that's me.
So this is silly, but we're getting ready to go on this vacation trip, and we're filling out, paperwork and stuff, and it's list your emergency contact. All the kids list me. I was proud of that. I was because I list my wife, and they all list me.
So why do we want to be this person that inspires others to trust us? What is it about us that enjoys that? Because I love it too. I'm I'm the guy you can fucking count on. I'm reliable.
As we were thinking about or as I was thinking about this episode leading into it, I thought, gosh, I probably really don't trust anyone, all the way. Like, there's no one I trust all the way. And for myself, I look at that as a character defect. I don't look at that as an asset. Yeah, it's not a good thing. What I find most of the time is what I'm fearful of or scared of usually isn't, like, the risk isn't worth the reward. It's like I'm going to benefit more by being open and honest about a feeling or a thought or a relationship. Like, I intellectually know that I'm going to benefit more, but the uncomfortableness of the intimacy and vulnerability is too much sometimes.
I don't know that so I've had this thought earlier in my marriage, and I'm kind of trying to reevaluate it now, but like, thinking of this idea of, like, if I was in this situation, my head's going to be chopped off. I need somebody to take care of this, 6-step plan to the letter. And my father had passed away, and I'm like, I don't have that person anymore. He's who I would call. Like, that motherfucker would have done it to the letter. Like, that's just who he was. And I don't feel like I have that person. And I'm trying to reevaluate now. I'm like, I still don't know exactly, like you said. Like, I don't know if I have that 100% faith in anybody. And is that a defect, though? Like, people are fallible. Like, I've fucked shit up. It's not like I like to think I'm this totally reliable guy, but I mess stuff up.
Yeah, so in that context, I don't know that it's necessarily a defect. But I mean, in my life in general, like, I want to be more trusting and more open and transparent about who I am. So why, getting back to your original question, like, why do I want to be a person that people trust? Is because I don't feel like I've ever had that person in my life. Like, growing up as a young person, I always felt like it's all up to me and I can't count on anybody because fucking they're going to let me down. And when you let me down, I'm going to be fucked. And then I got to deal with a mess that I didn't create, and it's going to be your fault. That's how it sort of goes in my head. So I don't ever want to be that person. I want to be the person that people can count on and rely on and depend on to get shit done. If you ask me to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show up, be the dependable, reliable, trustworthy person.
So maybe that doesn't take us into understanding trust so much, or how to practice it or how to cultivate it or whatever. But I do think there's something really important in there, in the sense of, by that example, which I think is very valid, because I feel like there was some of that in my life too. Like, I can't rely on my peers. I definitely felt that. Maybe this not having trust, right? This lack of trust, distrust. I want to call it untrust. I don't know why, but distrust. Is it distrust and then untrustworthy? Why? Why wouldn't it be distrustworthy or yeah, that's fucking weird. Anyway, I'm wondering if that led to a lot of the disconnection from society.
Oh,
right?
I think 100%.
Yeah, so that seems really valid, especially as much. Again, I don't ever want to say, like, connection is the answer to addiction or anything like that, but I do think it's a huge part, right? When we're connected and a part of something, we say, or at least they say a lot in the 12-step, like the personal accountability to something. You join this home group, you get a service position to remain accountable. I feel like that has a lot to do with trust and connection too. So yeah, maybe this lack of ability in our early years to find these trustworthy figures led us to not want to be connected. We were like, I can't connect, because to connect is to be vulnerable and in a dangerous place.
Yeah, and as addicts, like, we're so self-centered. We believe that we can do everything on our own. I can handle everything. I can figure it all out. I don't need anyone for anything. And that is an untruth. I don't know if I call it a lie. It's an untruth.
I see that in reverse.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't think that it's like we were so self-centered we thought we could handle it all on our own. I think we defaulted when we just were so scared of relying on anyone else, to the fact that there's no other choice but to do it alone. It is way too scary to involve other people in this. I don't think it's a selfish thing. I think it's a fear.
Well, what I figured out later in life, and again through step work, was that no one is perfect. And if I'm holding everyone to this standard of I can only trust them in perfection, I'm never going to find that person. You know what I mean? Like, I'm never going to, because even me being a person who feels like I'm incredibly dependable and reliable has still fucking forgot or fucked something up probably this month, probably this week, you know, because my level of commitment to being the most trusting person is based on how important I think this thing is that you're asking me to do, you know. And if it's, you know, check your mail while you're on vacation, I might forget, you know, a day or two. But if it's, you know, feed your dog, it's probably going to be a little more important. If it's watch your baby, it's going to be a little more important, you know. So learning that everyone is fallible and everyone makes mistakes, and then looking at myself and like being, even when I did love someone and I did care about them and they were really important to me, and then still forgetting something or letting them down doesn't mean I don't love them, which is the story I always told myself. You know, if people let me down, they don't love me. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares about me. I'm all alone, you know. And so learning that, no, people can love and care about you and still make mistakes, because mistakes are what humans do. You know, then I can learn to like, and again, it takes a little bit of judgment on who you can trust with what, but, you know, learning to trust people in different ways in different areas of our lives.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to wrap my head around this idea still of like the fear of not being able to trust others leading me to want to do everything myself, and how backwards that is, because like I actually could trust myself for a long time to get it wrong. So it was kind of strange, the fact that like I'm scared other people are going to screw up things or leave me hanging, but I left myself hanging, and I knew I was going to leave myself hanging, but I was still relying on me even though I knew it was going to go bad.
Right.
It's like I don't know, that just seems so ass backwards now looking at it from that line of thinking. Like, if I'd have left things in other people's hands, they'd have forgot some shit, but I'd have probably still been way better off than I was.
Well, and the other thing that I have found through my recovery, you know, journey has been that sometimes the people that you can count on in situations weren't the fucking people that you thought you could count on at all. And people that you would have never put in a list of like, hey, this is a person I really think I can count on, are people that will show up in the worst of times. You know,
Caroline talked about that. We haven't had her on for a while, but she talked about that when she went through a grief period, for sure, that it was people she didn't expect that were showing up for her, and the people she did weren't. And that's weird. So what does that tell us anything about like who we pick to trust, or does that just say things work out weird because who knows where people are in that point in their life during those times?
Yeah, and of course, this is a pretty general. I mean, trust, again, is another one of those things where it's so broad because it means so many different, it can apply in so many different situations. Right. So there's the trust of, I ask you to do something for me, you know, whether you're going to do it or not. Then there's the trust of like, you're not going to steal from me when my back is turned, which is a little different kind of trust. Or the trust that I'm going to share some information with you and you're not going to tell someone else about it, or you're not going to judge me for it. Right. Like, those are kind of very different applications of the same word.
Yeah.
But in general, this idea for me of trust in recovery has to do more with that last one that I talked about, is that like what's most important in my recovery is that I find people or have people in my life that I can talk about things with and share information with that aren't going to like judge me and put me down, that are going to be able to sort of keep my confidence so that they don't go out and like embarrass and humiliate me in front of other people, because I might need to talk about some pretty vulnerable things with those people. Because the recovery meetings, I mean, I love recovery, but you're surrounding yourself with dishonest, you know, people that lie, cheat, and steal for most of their lives. And just because we stop using drugs, that behavior doesn't go away, and it doesn't always go away right away, even in myself.
Right.
There was that period of time early in recovery. Like if someone in the store gave me too much change, I don't know if I'd have given it the fuck back. I wasn't using drugs, but it was still like, hey, win for me, Whereas now that's like, no, I want to be, a person of moral integrity. I want to be a trusting person, so I'm going to do the right thing.
When you say that, when you express like the way that you feel like trust affects you most in recovery, what that comes across like to me is like, I can trust people with my safety, not necessarily like physical safety, right? You're not going to jump in front of a bullet for me, but I can trust you that you are not out to harm me in any way, right? I trust that I can come to you and be my authentic self, so to speak, or my wiser self or my inner me. And that's never going to be exposed or used against me in any way. Like you generally have my well-being at heart is what I'm trusting in. Like this concept that you are safe for me.
Yeah. And those like that, I think is a critical element to have in recovery despite your audience. And so what I mean by that is I've went into meetings at times in a room full of people that I probably didn't know half of them or know half of them at least well, and shared some pretty intimate and vulnerable things out of just I'm going to say need. I know it's not necessarily a need, but just a need to get it off my chest, to vent it, to let go of it, to whatever, because I was struggling with it. And the trust isn't that none of those people are ever going to tell someone, or not that they're going to talk about it, whatever. Like in the moment, I don't care. But what's important is that I can have a place or a person that I can just let that go to and trust that I'll be okay, or that I'll be safe.
Yeah. So maybe in that sense, the trust that we're really cultivating isn't necessarily trust in anyone else. It's nice that we do have these levels of trust with people that we think they have our best interest at heart. But more the trust that we need is just the trust that it's going to be okay. Like at the end of it all, no matter what, we're going to be okay.
Yeah. Or it's like, okay, so let's say I'm struggling with something, like, let's say it's a personal issue, like my kids being abused or whatever. Like, is it more important that I share that and then, just be able to get whatever relief I can get from that, maybe some supporting words from someone in the meeting, or that I'm so guarded that I'm like, well, I'm not going to talk about that because so-and-so might talk about it to their friend after the meeting and say I'm a bad parent. Well, that might fucking happen. But what's more important? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Is it more important that I talk about that and possibly get the help, or that I live in this fear place that someone might possibly do something with that information to hurt me? And so I developed this, the idea of trust. Like, I gotta believe or choose to believe that, sharing it and talking about it and getting it out and opening myself up for help is better than the danger of what someone might do with that information that could potentially hurt me.
Thinking back to that Polyvagal Theory episode we did, just because I did some training on that, and I try to examine the world through that lens sometimes just to see how it fits. And, if we think about our nervous system in these different states of arousal, so to speak, there's the nice top of the ladder, like ventral, I feel safe and calm and connected with the world. And then the other two places on the ladder, the sympathetic nervous system action of fight or flight, or the dorsal parasympathetic nervous system reaction of, freeze, they're survival states. And I really feel like it's going to be impossible to gain any level of trust that I will be okay in a survival state, right? Like I'm already in a place where I feel like even if my life situation doesn't look like it, my body is no different than the caveman's body who's running from a bear, right? There's no way I can have a level of trust that I am okay from a survival place. It just doesn't seem even possible. So it's nice to say, well, we have to, gain this level of trust or look to this level of like, what do we call it? Like acting as if, I'll act as if I trust, and then hopefully things work out and it proves itself right. it's hard to say that somebody else should do that when I'm like, well, what if their nervous system is always in this state of survival? They'll never be able to do it.
Yeah, and of course, I go back to sort of NA literature because that's where my brain goes all the time. But it's like these principles come slowly over a period of time. Like we pick up the information as we, do the steps. And like, my relationship with my sponsor, let's say, when I picked my very first sponsor, I don't fucking know if I could trust the guy. I knew him for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Like I met him, coming off the streets and stopped using drugs. He had a couple of things that looked appealing, so I picked him to be a sponsor. At that moment, I wasn't ready to share my 5th step with him. You know what I mean? I probably would have not. And if I would have done it at that point, it would have sucked because there would have been a lot of information that I would not have been willing to divulge. But over time, we built a relationship, which is maybe a credit to the slow way that we sometimes do steps in this area or in our fellowship. But, we started working that first step and it might have built from, hey, I see you at some meetings and we talk and I see what you're about. I get to know you a little bit as a human being. And then, we talk about some things. I talk about my addiction and my using in my first step. And I talk about, my second step, my belief in God. Like those things are a little bit revealing, but not anything shocking. You're usually not going to hear much in a first or second step that you're like, holy fuck, dude, you are in trouble. Like, at least not my experience. Maybe some people have had that experience, but most of the time in a first and second, step as you're working with people. But you're like building that relationship. You know what I mean? You're showing that person, hey, I'm here to hear your ideas, however weird or crazy you might think they are. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be supportive, hopefully. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to be empathetic. I'm going to take out of my time to make time for you, to show you that like you're important and that you matter and that your recovery is important and I support you in this journey, and hopefully that's the kind of sponsor that I'm being, so that by the time we get to these more intimate steps that require this more intimate level of trust, that we've built that over time.
Yeah, I could see that. I think, early on it was just trusting that the program might work. Can you trust in a might?
Yeah, right.
Right? Like,
I think that's called hope.
Okay, maybe that's what it was. But more trusting like, hey, these people used and felt the way I did, and now they're living something different.
Right.
So that was like the original trust, I think. It was just, oh my God, like they've been the places I've been. They're talking about it, the same feelings, the same ways, means, and yet here they are and they're doing something different. So trusting in more that this process might work for me too, because again, trusting in might. Maybe I'm hoping, I don't know.
Yeah.
But just, that was the original trust. And like you said, building on it over time. Well, I've shared this with him. But I guess I wonder, so maybe from that stance, do we trust others before we start to trust in this idea that we'll be safe no matter what?
So like for myself, that the struggle is that I don't know even now that I trust that I'll be safe no matter what. And where that impacts me, again, back to the recovery version of trust that I'm using here, is that there are things, ideas, thoughts, feelings that I have that I, let's say in my marriage or in my sex life, that I won't share with my wife because in my head, it's weird, it's not good, it's unhealthy, or whatever reason, so I won't share things with her.
What are those things?
That can be, yeah, right. Like at face value, like I think that's detrimental to my marriage. I would hope that I could be open and trusting and vulnerable with this person. Like I believe that improves that quality of that relationship, being able to do that. For me, it's not as exciting as it might sound. It's more things.
No giraffes involved?
Yeah. It usually has more to do with like fears that I have, or, things where I'm struggling, like, oh my gosh, I might not be enough in this area. Oh my gosh, I might not know how to fix this problem. Oh man, I don't know what we're going to do about this, or these internal things that I'll tell myself. And, I create a false sense of myself that I'm presenting in the relationship because I'm unwilling to be honest about how I'm actually feeling or what I'm thinking at a moment.
Have you ever thought what if she does that? Does that hurt you in any way? Do you feel harmed by the idea that maybe she has things that she doesn't share with you?
Does she feel harmed by that?
Well, I'm just curious if you would in that position. Like if she has stuff, like if she was on a podcast right now talking to her co-host and she was like, man, there's these things I don't feel like I can share with my husband, whatever. If you heard that, would that make you feel like you were harmed? Like, would that make you feel worse?
I don't know that it would make me feel harmed. I mean, everything in our relationship, and I don't know if this is healthy or not, but most things I look at is like, well, then I need to do a better job at fixing it. You know what I mean? Now, this is an area where maybe there are some things she could do to make me feel safer, but I tend to believe it's more me than it is her, because she is a person that will share intimately about stuff like that. She's actually probably someone who's opened me to that kind of stuff. Like, I went through most of my life thinking, man, there's just a level of shit that I don't ever say out loud that goes on in my head because people will think I'm fucking crazy or need to be institutionalized. You know, like, that's like, I think crazy shit sometimes. And most of my life has been, again, from my upbringing, is like, well, there's just things you don't talk about, you know what I mean? And those are things, and it might be things around sex, you know, because, again, I was raised Catholic school, you know, sex is whatever, missionary with no other weird things, and anything else is like perverse and weird and going to hell.
You guys don't have a sheet between your bodies where you cut a hole in it?
No, but trying to get... like, just being honest about some of that sometimes has been difficult over the years. I mean, I've definitely gotten better. You know, recovery's helped me to look at some of that and own what I can. But what I mean is, you know, a lot of times, at least in our situation, the fact that I don't trust, that's where it gets back to. The fact that I don't trust, I look at more as a character defect, because I don't think it's anything she's doing or it's not her thing. It's me, just with this ingrained fear of someone's going to hurt me, someone's going to take advantage of me. And so I don't trust that trust is going to work out for me. Like, I don't trust that it's going to lead to a better place in our relationship and that it's going to make things better. The fear is, oh my God, this is going to cause her to not love me or leave me or go away.
Well, to normalize some of that for you, as a therapist, I can tell you that many people don't, and probably most humans, never find a comfortable place to talk about sex, whether that's with friends, their partners, or anybody, because I hear all kinds of wild stories in therapy sessions, probably only due to the confidentiality factor. Right. But yeah, I mean, spending hours talking about penis sizes and vulvas and wetness, and it's like, oh my God, what the hell did I get myself into? I had no idea that it's such a taboo topic. We don't have an open place to talk and express thoughts and ideas and feelings about sex, and it's so uncomfortable for our society to do it.
It's so bad for me because I'm terrible at it, and I have all this
terrible at sex.
No, not that part. I have 4 kids, but I have such a, what do they call that, modesty. Like, I'm so modest about even talking about it, just from my upbringing and stuff. Right. But on the flip side of that, like, Jen's really open about talking about things and actually does training in recovery that's called Sexual Health in Recovery, where they talk, like, they have a class, it's like open communications about sex stuff, and I'm just like, oh my God, I would be in that class, my face would be fucking beet red. I would like not want to answer any questions, you know, like. So she's a person who's, not only is she open to it, but she's actually doing it on somewhat of a regular basis. So she's even getting comfortable at it. And I am so uncomfortable.
I'm going to prescribe exposure therapy. You're invited to my next orgy.
Oh,
Lily.
Okay, great.
No. At least the new beach, something.
Well, it brings up an interesting question for me is, like, do things like therapy or meetings create like a false sense of trust, or is that real trust? Like, the fact that someone comes in, meets you for what, 3 or 4 sessions, and then is talking to you about some kind of sex stuff, they probably don't know anything intimately about you and your life, whether you're a person that's even worthy of their trust. But you're in this professional setting, so it creates a trust.
Well, there is some ethical boundaries, like my license could be on the line if I were to go anywhere or share their information with anyone. For some people, I do think there is that, session 1, 2, 3, or 4 conversation about that. And I think that trust is built on the establishment of the therapy environment, not so much me. But for other people, it's definitely like session, 48.
Right.
We're talking
First
about
couple sessions, I'll share some minor crazy shit.
Yeah. Some people do build more of that rapport with me before they're comfortable diving into that. And there's people who, we've seen each other for a year now, and we're still not, like, if I were to bring that up, that would still be like,
right.
What do you mean?
Never going to be there.
Yeah, maybe not.
This episode has been brought to you in part by Voices of Hope, Inc., a nonprofit recovery organization made up of people in recovery, family members, and allies. Together, members strive to protect the dignity of those that use drugs and those in recovery by advocating for treatment, harm reduction and support resources, and mentoring. Please visit us at www.voicesofhopemaryland.org and consider donating to our cause.
Going back to where you said, I'm still not sure I trust that I'm going to be okay. That brings up so many different directions for me, or ideas, right? So when I think about the idea of truly believing I'll be okay no matter what, right? The most tragic, horrible circumstances, I will find peace afterwards, right? Losing my family or something. I just, off the top of my head, that seems pretty fucking tragic and awful at the top of my list. What is the ability to actually have that level of trust? And I'm not trying to criticize here, but this, or label or judge, but like that, I feel like that's like Buddhist monk level of trust, right? Like everything will be okay no matter what. That's like to me, that's almost having no fear, or the ability to walk through any fear, which is interesting to me. So this is where it takes me. I've always thought like love is the opposite of fear, right? So is trust love? Because that feels like that level of trust that I'm just going to be safe no matter what is like the counter action to the idea that I'll be okay and I can walk through any fear. Did I take it is that too much of a stretch, or?
No, and where's Jenny, our Buddhist speaker for this? But like my understanding of like all spiritual principles are based in a state of love. Like they all come from that state of love. If you aren't there, it's hard to, that's what they're based in, is the attitude of love. And sort of character defects are based out of fear, their reactions to fear. So I guess I don't know how to answer your question exactly, but they come from a place of love. So they need love as a foundation, but they're a little different. Or maybe love encompasses all of them.
I'm almost wondering from that aspect, could spiritual principles coming from a place of fear be detrimental? Like, could we trust from a place of fear? Is that a thing? Is it like trusting someone because I'm too scared not to, or something like that? Like almost like a codependency?
Well, that's where like that's... I feel like, and I would have to analyze this a little more, but I feel like that's almost a little bit of I'm going to say like a word soup, or like manipulation of words, because that would, to me, would be hope. Like that's what hope is. It's like, I'm not sure, but I'm going to do this because I trust that the outcome's going to be good. Like, so that's more hope than it is,
or desperation.
Trusting in fear. Yeah.
Like I feel like trusting out of fear is like desperation almost.
Yeah.
Counting on something just based out of my that's really now I'm starting to wonder, are there actual different spiritual principles and character defects, or is this all just I'm living out of fear or I'm not?
Well, the way I understood most of like character defects are overblown, like assets or overblown spiritual
traits.
Principles. So so it's like any of these are on a spectrum, you know what I mean? Like it's dangerous to just trust everyone all the time in every situation, no matter what, you'll probably end up dead or ripped off or whatever.
Sounds foolish. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, when the person sent the message earlier that they're horny, it's probably smart to not trust that person. That's.
You think they stole my credit card when I called them last night?
Yeah, right. That's a case where like you don't just trust it. Oh, this person must be being on. Like that's a defect. Like that's not an asset to just trust everyone all the time, no matter what.
That wasn't trust. That was ego. I was just sure they were definitely horny looking at me.
Looking at you.
So it had to be real.
So they're all on a spectrum. So to any one side or the other is a detriment or can be a detriment. I mean, we don't just do them haphazardly. And that's where, like, coming into recovery, hopefully we learn, as we talked about in the beginning, like who we can trust with what.
Right.
There are people, like I have told people, like I wouldn't recommend walking into a meeting and sharing certain things. There's people that have shared stuff with me that I'm like, I would be careful sharing that in a meeting because, not everybody's at the same level with not talking about each other. And that sounds like something intimate that could be very hurtful. Like,
right.
You just got to be careful with what you're sharing with who. So I don't recommend anyone just have this blind faith in whatever 12-step meeting that they can just go in and say whatever they want and that someone in there isn't going to hurt them with that information.
You mentioned earlier you felt like your ability to see that you weren't always reliable or you were imperfect helped you trust. I think you said that because you saw that other people were fallible, and that doesn't mean that you can't trust. Like you don't need to trust in perfection. And really looking at that, I feel like it was step 6 and looking at my own character defects. That was kind of my first glimpse because I had this defense mechanism, I would say, or way of living that it was like, I thought I was perfect and I looked at every situation from an angle that made it look like I didn't do it wrong. Like it was somebody else's fault all the time. And so it was almost 6 where I was able to see that I wasn't perfect for the first time. So if that's what it took to lead me to a deeper level of trust, I would have not had it for 5. That's for sure. Like it was after that I kind of gained that ability to see that we were all, including myself, fallible.
Well, in 5, I believe my trust was in the process of recovery, not 100% in my sponsor specifically. Although at least because so my 5th step, and this good, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking of this earlier. My 5th step, I didn't share everything about myself in my 5th step with my sponsor.
Really?
What I was told, it was that you just needed to make sure you shared all of it with another human being. So by the time I was done, everything that was in there, I had shared with another human being. But that was not all my sponsor. There were some things that I had talked to my wife about, which wasn't my wife at the time, but there were things that I had shared with her that I didn't share with him, or things that other people knew about me, that I had shared with other people that I didn't share with my wife or him. So it wasn't necessarily important that all my trust be put into this one person.
That's that backward ass Cecil County version of recovery.
Must be. I don't know.
That's fascinating. It was always said in the meetings where I was from that was a possibility. Like, oh, you could share that with a priest if you really wanted to. It doesn't have to be your sponsor, blah, 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 blah. Nobody actually did it. And it was kind of like said with a wink, like you could share it with other people, wink, wink, right? But don't be a weirdo like that. So yeah, it was always just, it was assumed your sponsor was
let me
the
just
go-to.
break all the cliches. You can 13th step, it does work out.
There we go.
You can get in relationships in your first year. You don't need a quote unquote God to recover. Like, what other ones can we fuck up?
Yeah. Just hook up
all
with
this
somebody.
Misinformation that you get from good-hearted people.
Hook up with somebody with a lot of recovery.
I trust in the steps and the process, not
it's
the individual.
Sexually transmitted. Just lay next to them and get it.
No, I mean, now I would say I'm at a place in my life now where when I do my next 5th step with, like, assuming it's with my current sponsor, they're probably isn't anything. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head that I wouldn't share with him. But that has way more to do with me and where I'm at than him and who he is. Although he's a good, trustworthy person. I'm not saying that. It just, I'm at a place in my life where I feel safer, and that, you know, I do feel like I do trust more now in the process of openness and vulnerability than I would have back then.
Because you feel safer? Or you feel more of the ability to, I'll be okay no matter what happens with this? Maybe not with anything in life, but with this. Like, whatever. Take it, put it on a billboard, fuck it. I'm safe.
Yeah, and my philosophy on life has changed a little bit too. Like, whatever happens is sort of meant to happen, or it's happening for some, I don't want to say reason, but it's like it is what it is. So what do I want to do about it? Like,
it is what it is.
Yeah, this someone violates my trust and tells my wife something that I told them. Well, maybe that's for the best. Like, now we can use this as a growth opportunity, because the truth is I probably should have shared that with her in the beginning and it would have been better. You know, maybe not, but
it kind of brings me to the idea, the one thing I was thinking about, how would we cultivate trust? How would we practice the spiritual principle of trust if we were going to practice it? And what I came up with, the only thing that really jumped out to me was this idea that the more I become a guy who lives as a reliable person, the more willing I am to trust that other people are. You know, we used to have to pay for a ride in Baltimore. Like, most guys who were using didn't have the means to have a car. So you would stand out on Falls Road and you would wait for what they called a hack, right? And you would pay your $5 hack ride money, and they would take you over the road, and they would, you know, load up the car. It was usually somebody who was also involved in going over.
Right.
They were trying to make an extra $20 filling their car up, the other 4 seats. And sometimes, so say there were 6 people waiting and only 4 people could get in the car, you know, somebody would take the money for the other people. I'll pick your stuff up for you. And you could tell who would burn you for sure, because they would never give you their money. You'd be like, hey, look, I'll pick up your pill for you to get well, right? And they're like, no. And they were coming from a place of, they know what they would do if you handed them your $10. They weren't coming back with your pill, so they didn't trust. And that wasn't universal, right? There's probably some other factors. It was a really high importance to get well that day, so they weren't trying to take any chances. I get it, right?
Control freaks.
Yeah.
Can't wait for you to get back. I gotta...
Right. But definitely this idea of, like, when you're not a trustworthy person, you're not going to have the willingness or the ability to think anyone else is. We default to assuming everyone else is like us. And so if I am not living in a trustworthy manner, if I'm not reliable with anything, I'm going to believe nobody else is either. So I feel like one way I have been able to increase my level of trust is just the fact that I live different. And the more I live different, the more I'm willing to trust that other people might come from that same place.
Yeah, and that I am a person of integrity. Like, I am a person that, like, I mean what I say, and I say what I mean, and I take most people to be the same way. The difference now is I don't rate people's shortcomings or failures or not following through or mistakes, whatever, as some reflection of myself. You know what I mean? Like, that's, I guess, what I've learned is that because someone does something and makes a mistake, that's not directly a reflection of me. Sometimes it can be, but usually it's not. Usually it has way more to do with them and some defect or some shit going on with them than it has to do with me. So when someone violates my trust or tells another person something about me or talks about me behind my back, like, I've learned that's usually their shit, not mine.
Gotcha.
You know,
I'm just trying to picture. So my boss, the owner of the therapy practice, she presents herself as really giving a shit about people and caring about the community, and like a person who would self-sacrifice for the greater good. And that's how she presents herself. And I just feel like if I would have met her in my first couple years of my recovery journey, I'd have been like, there's something. She's full of shit, right? She's got an angle. This is the card she plays to get things or whatever. But like today, I trust it. Like I have the ability to. And granted, I mean, my eyes are open. If I ever saw something to the contrary, I would probably reevaluate that. But there's an ability to trust that, like, maybe that's real, because that's kind of how I live. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but
and you do see over time, you see that with people in recovery as well. Like, we all know the people that come in and share real good, and then they're out doing all kinds of shady shit on the side, or, you know what I mean? They're talking about living spiritual principles and whatever, name the thing, stealing from their job or extramarital affair or
going to
whatever.
their girlfriend's house on the way home to their wife.
Yeah, or picking up newcomers in the meeting. Like, all the stuff that when they have a relationship. Yeah, it's like all the stuff that you see, like those things do exist, but then there are people who are genuinely, consistently people that like show up at meetings, and when you see them, they're the way that they share, or at least the close to it. I mean, again, we all make mistakes. I just brag a little bit about myself. Like, I've been a person that, for whatever reason, people that I'm not necessarily close with will randomly call me and be like, hey, I'm going through this thing. Usually it's a relationship thing that they don't want to talk about openly in a meeting. And people feel like they can trust me. And I like to think it's because I don't do any of that shit. Like, I try to be a pretty straight shooter. Not that I don't go in meetings and talk about areas I've made mistakes and fucked up, and even in recovery, mistakes I've made. But I think that I'm a person of integrity. Like, I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. And if you ask me not to say something, I'm going to really try not to say something. Like, I've learned those practices, principles, I guess.
Interesting.
But I've been on the other side of that. I had a sponsor that violated my trust with a friend of ours. We were talking about something, and he went and told this other person. Ooh. It was something we were talking about his wife, and he went and told them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty shitty. And he ended up, I mean, it created some animosity in our relationship for a minute with me and the other guy. And I don't even remember exactly what it was. It was something like, because it wasn't like a mistruth, it was just an opinion about something, or a way that I felt about something someone was doing. And, I felt bad, and I felt like I needed to fix that. But then, my sponsor at the time had come to me and said, hey, man, I did this. I'm really sorry. Like, it kind of happened. And as soon as I did it, I knew it was wrong, and I made a mistake, and I'm really sorry. And that was enough. Like, I was like, okay, you know what I mean? I get it. Like, I didn't sabotage that relationship. We still remained close. And, I was like, he just fucked up. Like, it happens, I'm sure they were in a conversation about something close to that topic came up, and this thing just came out before he probably really thought, how that might look on me. And, that's, shit happens, man. Everything's not always about me. I don't know that he ran right out and went, oh, I'm going to go tell this other friend this thing to sabotage the relationship.
That's interesting. I had a situation. God, I'm really telling on myself here. So I had a sponsor. We had gone over a 4th step. He knew my dirt. He knew that I had stepped outside of my relationship, and came to light a while later. One of the things that I did not put on my 4th step, obviously, was that I had slept with his wife. And he took the information from my 4th step back to my girlfriend and told her all these girls I had messed with, and then tried to sleep with her. And I don't know. I wasn't too mad about it, but mostly because I felt like, oh, I kind of had that coming, honestly. But you sharing that kind of made me wonder, like, not that what I did was right, or maybe in a worldly human sense, yeah, maybe I did have it coming, whatever. But, like, was that the wrong view of me to have of that? Like, should I have just taken on all the blame for that? That's kind of, I don't know. Something about that doesn't seem right either.
No,
like, he
I don't
still
think he
shouldn't have
No, he
violated
shouldn't
my
have done
trust.
that at all.
Even if I did, violate his.
Yeah, it's like the old 2 wrongs don't make a right, just because I did something wrong. And again, in that situation, what I said was wrong. I shouldn't have said what I said, or,
Well, and how did he not know? He was my sponsor, and he was a guy who stepped out of his marriage. Like, obviously, he was my sponsor for a reason.
Right.
It was attraction.
Yeah. Well, and again, we all aren't perfect, and people are going to make mistakes. And the truth is, I mean, at least in your case, you stayed clean through it, right? No, not through that.
Nope. Oh. Yeah, that everybody involved in that went out and used.
Yeah.
it's
Now,
pretty-
did that? I mean, you felt like that was a part of it? Like, did that push you out of meetings or?
I really
Hard
don't
to tell.
know.
Yeah, too many variables.
Well,
Probably
and
didn't
that's-
help. That's for
yeah,
sure.
definitely. The
Like-
shame, the guilt, the alienation, or ostracization.
Yeah, I don't know
Is
how
that a word?
Ostracized.
Yeah, from my home group and all those kind of things in my recovery network. I mean, I got another sponsor. I continued to work steps. I continued to hit 6 meetings a week, but at some point, using sounded good.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it contributed in some way, shape, or form to it. But like your theory, it is what it is. It had to happen. It led me to where I am. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, those things are all learning experiences. I think sometimes, and again, it's the way that I've had to make sense of bad situations that have happened in my recovery. But it's like life just sort of happens to all of us. You know what I mean? And it doesn't need to be like, or I choose not to focus on who's at fault and the whys and the hows and the whats, but it's like, okay, well, this is where we're at, and what can I do going forward to try to make it better, improve, you know what I mean, heal, whatever it is. Like, I can't undo what's already done. I can't, take back something that I've done or undo something that someone else did. Like, I can just choose how I want to deal with it moving forward.
Yeah, fuck that. His wife was at fault. She had no business having boobies that big and calling me.
Right. Yeah.
There's just no reason for that. Going into the science behind trust, there's a strong correlation in what they believe. I don't know about causation, but they believe to be heavily involved in the trust process is the chemical of oxytocin, right? We usually look at this as like the bonding chemical between babies and moms. It's one of those things produced during sexual experiences. Definitely in regard to women, men seem to have not as much sexual connection based in oxytocin during sex, but that's, some other societal issues probably. I don't think it just doesn't exist, right? But this is like that bonding hormone or part of us. And so they've found ways to kind of measure the levels of oxytocin of people in trusting experiments with other people. And it was a weird experiment too. They had people send money to another person, and the amount of money they sent was based on the level of trust they had that when this person made money on that amount of money, they would send some back and look out for them. Yeah, it was a really weird setup too. But they measured the oxytocin levels, and the higher the oxytocin level, the more trusting and the higher amount of money they were willing to send. And also in the same for the person who was receiving. The more oxytocin they had, the more they were actually willing to act in trust and send money back, which was super strange too. But then they boosted people's oxytocin levels with like a nasal spray of oxytocin.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I know. And it led to more than double the amount of money being sent in both directions. And so there is a chemical process associated with this idea of trust. It is like a measurable type thing. And that's kind of fascinating, right? So like maybe that has something to do. The level we're able to bond with people helps our ability to trust. So people
I
who
would bet. Yeah.
don't feel connected to recovery, people who struggle to get plugged in, maybe people whose substance use has led them to be less socially inept less socially adept, I guess is the opposite of inept. I don't know. I'm using words I don't know enough right now. But anyway, their lack of ability to socialize and bond and be a part of a recovery community, they're going to struggle a lot more to gain this level of trust. And it's like, well, how do we work with that? I mean, look, I'm not trying to talk about anybody, but the awkward person.
Right.
Like, how do you help them fit in when it's kind of uncomfortable for you to be around them?
Yeah.
Because I feel like they need that trust too.
Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, I tend to just have a vague belief that most people find where they're comfortable. I know that there are certain people that I meet and I connect with and I just like them. And then there are certain people that I meet and I don't connect with and we have a hard time communicating. Just we're not in the same frequency. I don't know how to describe that, but I think there's a frequency for everybody, a group or a peer group, which I think is the autonomy of meetings, what makes that so great is that hopefully meetings have different identities and personalities and things like that. I immediately thought of the con artist people. Like, a lot of times they rely on relationships.
They're charming.
Yeah, or just to reach out. Like, they're preying on lonely and vulnerable people a lot of times that are, on the internet looking for a relationship because there's some inadequacy at home or in themselves. And this person, oh, I love you. I'm going to come be your bride from wherever I am in Africa, and you can come see me and I'll come see you, and just send me a couple $1,000 and it'll be great. I guess they're relying on that oxytocin level going up.
Yeah, they're boosting people's trust levels. So just looking at some of the minor research, it says shadow of doubt lingers over every decision to trust, but you can do a lot to reduce that doubt. Step 1, know yourself. Right. And knowing yourself, you're going to be able to figure out who you are and what level of trust you need to some extent, right? Like what level of trust you want to put into other people. And I think it goes back to that idea we were talking about. Like, the more I'm a trustworthy person, the more I'm going to default to thinking that other people at baseline probably are too. They probably have good intentions too, which I think we've talked about on previous episodes when we talk about anything that has to do around the political arena, or it goes that way. We kind of have this baseline of assuming others are like evil or out to get us. And
right.
So it's like, no, I can't trust that any decision is for the good of all. It's got to be about me and what's mine, and don't take anything from me because I need all that, instead of trusting that like we're all going to have enough.
Right.
Another part says rule 2 is start small. You don't want to obviously jump into it. Going back to your idea of the way our steps kind of work in a slow manner of building up that trust.
Yeah, I think there's a whole different conversation around like financial trust or monetary trust and who you give your money. Like, that's a whole different thing, I think, that's unrelated to recovery. Like, it's almost the opposite. Like, if you're going into trusting someone with your money or your finances or investments, you want to do some work. You don't just want to go up to the guy in the meetings like, hey, I've been playing the stock market for a couple months. I'm getting pretty good at it. You want to give me your retirement? That's not the trust we're talking about. At least not that I'm talking about in recovery.
Yeah, I still don't know exactly, though, how I would tell people if somebody came to me and said, man, I'm struggling with trust. I don't know what suggestions I would necessarily give them beyond those 2 that we just kind of mentioned, to say, this is how you practice that in your life. Like, I think really, and I hate to take it all back to our nervous system, but like, me having a calm, centered nervous system is going to help people around me feel more calm and centered, even if for short moments of time. And the ultimate goal is to increase those moments of time that they can have the ability to feel that. And so, like, maybe that's where my role in a recovery community would be to be just a calm, trusted, centering voice, right? A person who is reliable, who shows up, and like just that action is going to help others feel that in the community. Like, if we can build a community around that vibe of like connection and care and concern and looking out for people's best interest in some way, maybe having less opinions about what's good for people and just showing up and trying to be supportive no matter what. I guess that's going to help them feel that level of safety that trust can come from.
Yeah, and just understanding that it does take time to build trust with, whether it's the program, whether it's an individual, in a relationship. Like, it does just take time. These things aren't just things that we come in, walk in the door, and like, yeah, I trust that this is going to be, because for me in the beginning, they say all this stuff, and I'm saying I'm getting to understand it a little bit when they would say, oh, it's a life beyond your wildest dreams. I'm like, man, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that was a bullshit. That just wasn't true. I could imagine a lot of good things in my life, and recovery has not been beyond that.
I was going to be a rock star on a yacht with chicks in bikinis. That was my early version.
Having trust in this process of recovery has really just been trial and error. I've tried some things, I've seen what hasn't worked, I've tried some other things, found out what has worked, and that's what I learned to trust in. My experience and what's worked for me and what's happened over time. And that's why I continue to find my way back to meetings and the steps and a sponsor in that process, because my experience has been that when I do that, my life gets better. It's that trust in that. I understand for some people that may not be their experience, and they may not have that trust, and they may decide, oh, I need something more. I need something different. I need something beyond that. And that's cool too. It doesn't mean I can't trust in this process because it doesn't work for someone else. I can still trust in it because it works for me.
And going back to that idea we kind of came to about honesty, I think it is also that level of trust as a balance, right? I don't want to be, if I'm not trusting enough anywhere, it's gonna lead to isolation probably, and not, being able to be vulnerable or connect to anybody. And yet if I trust everything too much, the Nigerian prince is going to have all my
right.
bank account information, right? So I do need this level of, I should not go into, my romantic relationship and 100% trust that individual has my best interest, or doesn't have, even if it's not about my best interest, maybe they don't have their shit figured out well enough to not, do things that harm me. I need to be open and look for the red flags and see these things. I can't just be all in nope.
All right.
It's
Move her in after 3 months. We're great.
3 months, 3 days. Look, she's been held up at work all 4 nights this week, right? And doesn't get home till 9, and her hair's a little messy, and
right.
her underwear's sticky. She probably just has some weird stuff going on. Send her to the OB or something. I don't want that 100% level of trust. It is something I build up over time to where it's he or she hasn't established, hey, 15 years straight, they've been coming home and doing what they said they were doing. And now there's probably a whole lot more trust than there was in that first week. And that's how it's supposed to be.
Well, and it's our misunderstandings of trust or how that's supposed to work. Because I say, I would almost, similar to what you're talking about in relationships, I would get into a relationship and think, hey, just because we went into this relationship means I can trust you unconditionally with anything, not looking at anything to do with your history or the relationship around, which we met,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're both using drugs at a party and we went and banged out back. Yeah, that's great. Let's become boyfriend, girlfriend. Now I can trust you with all my shit.
Here's my debit card.
Right. Wait a minute. We've known each other 72 hours. That's not a foundation to build trust.
Yeah.
And you can build trust there. It isn't there yet.
Right.
It takes time. But
so I guess I don't know, for whatever reason, and I don't even know if this is based in any real good rationality in my head, I believe more in this idea of trust than I do in willingness or courage necessarily. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see the rest of the year if I tend to believe in a principle or not. And maybe by the end of the year, I'll figure out why.
And maybe asking, when you're in those situations, if you say you can't trust, well, who are you putting your trust in? And what are you trusting them for?
Right.
Because that may help you find the person that you're looking for.
I like it. So I trust that y'all will be listening next week, and we will see you then. Have a good week. Did you like this episode? Share it with people you think might get something out of it. Check out the rest of our episodes at recoverysortof.com. Also, while you're there, you can find ways to link up with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, anything. We're always looking for new ideas. Got an idea you want us to look into? Reach out to us.